Lightning has officially struck twice in the Pokemon Go Championship Series. My name is Homeslice Henry, and today I'm going to be talking about the second ever perfect tournament run in competitive Pokemon Go history. Now, the first perfect tournament run was in September of 2023. LNDS Hardjeff went 18-0 at Curitiba. And this past weekend in Bologna, Italian native Philbag went 18-0 with Shadow Malamar, the second perfect tournament ever to take home the crown and clinch his world's invite. The team that Philbag brought to Bologna is built around Shadow Malamar, a newly released Shadow Pokemon that for the very first time for this tournament was actually eligible. So to pair up with Shadow Malamar, he brought Furret, Tinkaton, Swampert, Azumarill, and Talonflame. And part of the reason why he brought this particular team was its very strong matchup into the Axon team that just won Portland. His first streamed match was against Wolfpack, a trainer running Shadow Jumpluff, Blastoise, Tinkaton, Shadow Malamar, Gastrodon, and a bit of an unusual choice in Dusclops. For game number one, Philbag leads Talonflame into Tinkaton, an absolutely dominant lead. But there are two responses to that Talonflame in the back, as Shadow Malamar is going to hit the field. And for Philbag, he doesn't really have a great response to Shadow Malamar in the back. So instead, he's going to be staying in with the Talonflame, committing the shield, and Talonflame is now going to go for the fly. Fly is cheaper than Flame Charge. He will not be able to boost up his damage here, but now, by getting the shield, he can send in his own Shadow Malamar. He is at a disadvantage here in terms of the amount of energy that he has, but he should be in an okay spot, considering the fact that he was able to preserve that Talonflame at pretty decent health to wall off at least one charge move from the Tinkaton later in the match. We do see the final shield come out from Wolfpack. He's going to fire off the foul play and now send back in the Tinkaton. Tinkaton cannot get to the Bulldoze. Shadow Malamar going to strike first here as it unleashes Superpower. Superpower is going to connect. That's big damage. Malamar getting one more Superpower as well. Wolfpack now going to be deep into the red health. Philbag actually goes for an undercharge because he wants farm on the Talonflame. In comes the Talonflame. Talonflame, a complete wall to all charge moves from Tinkaton. So for Philbag, this works out quite nicely, as he will get that Incinerate head start. It's a Blastoise lurking in the back, and Blastoise is really not going to appreciate Furret. But Blastoise not going to be revealed just yet. In comes the Shadow Malamar. Shadow Malamar, foul play, will pick up the KO. Philbag holding on to that final shield for the Furret. We see the banking of the Superpower, and now in comes Blastoise. Blastoise, unfortunately, at an energy disadvantage here, and that's going to be what sinks Wolfpack in this game number one. Trailblaze, big damage, but will not be enough to knock out. He's trying to get to the back-to-back Hydro Cannons, but he's unable to get there. Philbag, that trusty Furret, makes the Swift, knocking out the Blastoise. In comes the Malamar. Malamar has the Superpower loaded, but Furret was able to hold on to that Protect shield. Superpower is going to be shielded. Furret gets the Sucker Punch down, and that's going to be a Game 1 win. We move to game number two. Wolfpack sticking with the Tinkaton lead, but Philbag adjusts, and we're actually looking at a Tinkaton lead mirror. For Philbag, he has to be very happy seeing this lead, considering he has Furret in the back. And this is the one matchup where Furret has no play. So, Furret dodging the Tinkaton means that he should be in a really nice spot for Furret to put in work in the endgame. The first Bulldoze does debuff for Philbag. We do not see a debuff for Wolfpack. One of my favorite plays, if I'm leading Tinkaton into a mirror and I have Furret in the back, is as long as you get one debuff onto that Tinkaton, after this second CMP tie, you can actually aggressively pivot into the Furret, and Furret can take advantage of the slow pacing on Tinkaton. And that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to send in Furret. Furret, this damage adding up quite a bit. He's able to outpace, get to the Swift, and Wolfpack is forced to let this go. So Swift picks up the knockout. He's forced to send in the Shadow Malamar, and Shadow Malamar is not going to be particularly comfortable here. Malamar immediately under pressure from this Swift, and Swift is going to be grabbing a Protect Shield. And now Malamar will immediately go for the foul play. The immediate shield from Philbag, as Philbag does want to try and get shields down in this matchup. The switch clock also up for Wolfpack, not up for Philbag. Wolfpack tries to go for the CMP tie. Philbag actually gets a free Sucker Punch, and this now means that Filbeg can win the 2 shield. Filbeg will get to double up, or here he throws one before the double up, and Wolfpack is just going to let this go. Wolfpack going to try and sweep with the Blastoise. Swift picks up the knockout. In comes the Blastoise. Furret going to opt for a Swift bait. This is an incredibly smart bait from Filbeg, as normally Furret would always go for the Trailblaze, so it feels like a safe shield for the Blastoise, but now with the bait, Furret is actually going to make it 2 on Trailblaze, and this is just going to do way too much damage to the Blastoise, and Wolfpack knows this is going to seal it. Furret able to do so much work to the Blastoise, and now in comes the Azumarill, and this health disparity here is not something that you can ever overcome as the Blastoise. Blastoise just gonna get knocked out here by the Play Rough. Even an Ice Beam would have done the trick, but Filbeg, calm, cool, and collected. He knows he can get the Play Rough. Down goes Blastoise, and that's gonna be a quick 2-0 win to send Filbeg into day number 2. Filbeg's first match of day number 2 was going to be a very difficult one, as he was queued against Nickname. Nickname is a 3-time regional champion. 2 of those wins have happened this competitive season, so Nickname has been on an incredible hot streak at these regionals. However, if you want to win a regional, you're going to have to beat the best, so battling against Nickname is a great start. However, what's not a great start is leading Shadow Malamar into Azumarill. This is a nightmare matchup for the Malamar, as Malamar's charge attacks are completely walled. Malamar can force switch advantage in the 0-2 shield, but that would require Filbeg giving up both protect shields before Azumarill concedes a single one. Azumarill is going to farm up past the Play Rough, going to bait with the Ice Beam, and it looks like Filbeg is going to play this matchup out. He's going to have to give up both Protect Shields, but he will win alignment in the back. And alignment could be very important considering there is an Azumarill for Filbeg and a Shadow Malamar for Nickname. The foul play is going to land. Azumarill can even just go for an Ice Beam at this health range. Filbeg is going to double shield. Now, Shadow Malamar can farm down here. I'm expecting Nickname to pivot out. Nickname does not pivot out. He's going to try and make a move with the Azumarill, but he does not get there, and Shadow Malamar leaves on 100 energy. This is really tough. He's going to send in his own Shadow Malamar, but he's so far behind in terms of energy. Filbeg is going to get 3 foul plays before Nickname gets even 1. We see the back-to-back foul plays are reached. Nickname, he's fully throwing away the Malamar. He's going to try and sweep with the Swampert. Swampert instantly met with this foul play. That's going to be shielded up by Nickname. And now for Filbeg, he should look to pivot out here as Shadow Malamar will finally leave the field. In comes Furret. Furret just going to go straight for the Swift. Filbeg knows that he just needs damage on this Swampert, so he goes for the Swift. Nickname knows it's not enough energy for a Trailblaze, so he lets it go, but this plays right into Filbeg's hand. It's a brilliant play by Filbeg. Trailblaze would pick up the one-hit KO, but he doesn't need the one-hit KO. He just needs to put it in bubble down range for the Azumarill. So Nickname says, this is the move that I can no-shield, so he lets it go. But now, Azumarill comes in, and there's just not enough damage on the Swampert. So out of a pretty terrible lead scenario for Filbeg, Filbeg is able to get so much value out of that Shadow Malamar, and the brilliant decision to go for the Swift means that he can just farm down this Swampert and take the game 1 win. Moving into game number 2, it's like staring in a mirror, Shadow Malamar versus Shadow Malamar. Now this lead matchup will be entirely decided on who wins charge attack priority. Nickname does not throw right away, Filbeg does, so it appears Filbeg pretty confident in the attack stat on his Malamar. Obviously, one move will not be enough to knock out. Here we see a superpower from Nickname. That's going to do some pretty significant damage. Superpower does hit harder than foul play. Superpower is going to land, and Filbeg actually deciding not to throw right away. Instead, Filbeg is going to be shielding up the foul play and looking to overfarm quite significantly here. Malamar farming up to the back-to-back moves, and now Nickname has a choice to make. Nickname deciding to let this go. Nickname can potentially go for a bubble down now with the Azumarill, but once Azumarill hits the field, I'm expecting to see a pivot, and we do see the pivot as Furret hits the field. That's a great pivot by Filbeg, as his Shadow Malamar energy, very strong into the Superior, but pretty useless into the Azumarill, so he does not let that energy go to waste. Instead, he pivots out, and this Tinkaton is going to do a great job at shutting down Azumarill in the endgame. Frenzy Plant is going to connect. That's big damage onto the Furret. Furret continuing to farm and going for another Swift. Superior will end up committing the Protect Shield here, and that's really, really nice for Filbeg. Filbeg still has the move loaded on the Malamar, and oh no, the miscount by Nickname. He accidentally plays to a CMP tie that he does not win. Even if he did not do that, however, the writing was already on the wall for this game. Aerial Ace into the Furret is going to be enough to pick up the KO. In comes the Malamar, not throwing the move, anticipating the switch, and there is the Tinkaton, and you can see the frustration from Nickname. He had every advantage in game number 1, but Filbeg, with that Shadow Malamar, was able to generate such incredible leverage and take the win. And now in game number 2, his Azumarill pivoted out of the Furret and ends up switch locked onto Tinkaton. And Tinkaton is where Azumarill energy just goes to die. Azumarill firing off Play Rough after Play Rough. Filbeg knows he does not even have to shield this. He can survive no problem going for another Play Rough, and each Play Rough that lands onto Azumarill, it's just lower and lower and lower. There's the switch into Malamar. Malamar firing off the Foul Play. Foul Play will be enough to deny the Azumarill any ability to do any more damage. In comes Superior, and Superior is going to get knocked out with a superpower. And that is a dominant showing from Filbeg, as he's going to advance to the winners semifinals, courtesy of this 2-0 victory. In winners semifinals, Filbeg was paired against Colin 6, the final boss, who is running the team that It's Axon won Portland with just last weekend. It's a nice lead for Filbeg, leading Tinkaton into Malamar, but Malamar's ability to superpower and dip here genuinely makes Tinkaton not feel amazing in this lead matchup, as superpower does do quite a lot of damage. There is Blastoise, and Blastoise will swiftly be answered with Furret. Furret, very nice charge attack timing here, going to unleash Trailblaze. Blastoise always wins the zero shield here, so that's a really nice no shield by Colin. Colin, understanding the situation, understanding what shielding scenarios that he does and does not win, and now gets to fire off another Hydro Cannon, and Furret is forced to go down a shield. So Colin, even though he doesn't have the alignment he's looking for, he is able to generate an advantage out of this matchup. The uncomfortable thing for Colin, though, is the fact that Furret is heavily boosted here, which means this Swift is going to do big damage, rocking the Malamar. We're going to see a beautiful catch by Filbeg, catching onto the Azumarill. He's able to preserve that Furret for later, and now Azumarill is going to be met with the Shadow Jumpluff. Shadow Jumpluff farming up so much energy. Colin, he's up energy, he's up a shield, he's not going to bait. Filbeg no shields, and Acrobatics is going to land. Azumarill will be firing off the Ice Beam. This is double super effective damage, and Jumpluff will of course commit the shield. Azumarill goes for the Ice Beam, but loses charge attack priority to the Shadow Jumpluff. Acrobatics goes through, and it will get knocked out. Back in comes the Tinkaton. Tinkaton unleashing Play Rough. Colin going to be double shielding here. Farming up with the Tinkaton. Tinkaton not quite in Acrobatics range, but Acrobatics will get it dangerously low. So Filbeg now has to make a call. He's going to no shield. Acrobatics will not be enough to KO, and now he will get to fire off this Play Rough. Play Rough lands, getting the Jumpluff low. Oh my goodness, the catch from Colin. Colin catches the Swift onto the Malamar, but here's the thing. He can't double up. He's on his 5 cycle. Furret gets to the Swift, and Filbeg survives, preserving that Furret, catching the foul play onto Azumarill. It was the game-winning play for Furret as he takes a 1-0 lead. Now we move to game number 2 in this best of 3 series. Azumarill into the Shadow Jumpluff, and we will see a safe switch into the Furret. Furret firing off the Swift instantly here, being able to get the turn back, and we will see the bait from Colin, and the bait is successful as Filbeg surrenders a Protect Shield on the Aerial Ace. Now Colin can commit to an Acrobatics. The CMP tie here, this Swift will not be enough to knock out. Colin knows it, Filbeg knows it, and now this is Acrobatics, but we see a double shield from Filbeg. He is full committing to the Furret. The fact that Lapras is the switch in tells him Furret has value in the back. Furret going to fire off the Swift, potentially trying to put it into Play Rough range for the Azumarill, but Colin not going to let that happen, will commit the shield, and now Filbeg gets the pivot back into the Azumarill. Because the Jumpluff stayed in for so long against the Furret, the switch timers are almost back in alignment here. Colin obviously will be able to escape, but he's not going to be able to escape this matchup without throwing a move first. So Colin will get to fire off the Sparkling Aria. The switch timer will be available shortly thereafter, and there it is. In comes Blastoise. Blastoise going to be chipped with a Play Rough. This is going to burn the switch timer for Filbeg, and then Filbeg will be able to send in his final Pokemon, which is Tinkaton. That play rough landing is really valuable chip damage, as now this puts it in a range where Tinkaton can't potentially look to secure a knockout with a singular play rough. So Tinkaton more than happy to absorb the back-to-back Hydro Cannons. This is the regular Blastoise, which means the Hydro double up will not be enough to KO. The bait from Philbeg. Colin, thinking about it, he is going to call that it is going to be the Bulldoze. A great bait call by Colin. Hydro Cannon is going to knock out the Tinkaton, but it will let the Furret to get back onto the field. Furret going to be answered with a switch into the Lapras. Furret is going to be able to force the final shield away from Colin. So Swift is going to land. There's the switch into the Azumarill, and Azumarill is going to force energy from the Lapras. Lapras firing off the Sparkling Aria that will not set up a farm down. Lapras is going to have to throw again here, and Lapras will do just that. So Lapras will get the Aria. It will easily be enough to KO the Azumarill. Back in comes the Furret. He gets the Sparkling Aria, but Sparkling Aria will not be enough to knock out here. Sparkling Aria is going to connect. That gets the Furret very low, but there's just such little HP remaining on Colin's Pokemon. In comes the Jump Bluff. There's the switch into the Blastoise, trying to get the rollout to land, but a quick Swift from the Furret is going to knock out the Blastoise. Back in comes the Jump Bluff. Jump Bluff gets Sucker Punch down, and Philbeg advances by a score of 2-0. Philbeg now has a record of 12 wins and 0 losses as he advances to winners finals against PvP David 07. PvP David, fresh off a victory at Stuttgart and a top 2 at Stockholm, he has played brilliantly throughout the course of the season. David's team is the same team that Colin is running. Lapras, Diggersby, Shadow Jumpluff, Tinkaton, Blastoise, and Malamar. So for Philbeg, he does have a bit of matchup knowledge here, as he just played against Colin, so he will know how his team matches up against the team, but obviously he won't know information like in the mirror matches, which Pokemon are going to win Charge Attack priority, as obviously the IVs are going to vary from competitor to competitor. This series is now a best of 5, and the winner advances to a guaranteed top 2 placement in Grand Finals. For game number 1, it's going to be Talonflame for Philbeg into the Lapras of PvP David. Philbeg already looking to switch out here. He's going to send in Shadow Malamar, instantly answered by Tinkaton. Now this matchup, not a particularly comfortable one for the Shadow Malamar, but as we take a look at the line of 3 Philbeg is running, this is by design. Philbeg is trying to lure out the Tinkaton to set up a Furret sweep. David baits with the Bulldoze, and Philbeg immediately no shields. The Bulldoze bait is called, no debuff applies, and now Shadow Malamar should be able to force a shield here. Shadow Malamar, I believe, has back-to-back superpowers loaded. David is going to shield. He's hoping to get this farm down, but he can't get it. There's another superpower. David's forced to let it go, and Shadow Malamar is completely running away with the mid-game. Shadow Malamar wins the 0-1 shield against Tinkaton. That called Bulldoze bait, absolutely devastating. And now for Philbeg, he has to decide, does he go for it? Does he bring in the Talonflame? He sends in the Talonflame. This is an incredibly important read. Philbeg making the call that he can just sacrifice the Talon and that it will be Furret that takes home this win. Talonflame is going to take big damage. There's a switch into the Blastoise. The rollout goes through, but not before the fly is reached. This is an open team sheet format, so David knows it's not going to be a Brave Bird. It is just a fly, but out comes Furret, and the beautiful line construction from Philbeg is going to ensure him a Game 1 win. David having that Bulldoze bait called really made life difficult for him in the mid game, but even still, once he was able to successfully bait out that Tinkaton, Furret was just so strong into David's team. David is going to shield up the Trailblaze, but the decision to go for a Trailblaze is a very wise one, as it means that Furret, with these boosted Sucker Punches, will be able to farm down the Blastoise. Blastoise is going to stay in, trying to get the Hydro Cannon, but it cannot get there. And now Furret gets to go for the boosted Trailblaze, and this will be big damage into the Lapras. Trailblaze number 2, no Protect Shields available. Lapras will get rocked. Lapras needs a double up on Sparkling Arias, and it cannot get there as Furret makes it to the Swift. And that's going to be a Game 1 victory for Philbeg in this best of 5 series. For game number 2, we see the Shadow Malamar for Philbeg into the regular Malamar for PvP David. This matchup is going to depend so much on who wins Charge Attack priority in this matchup. Shadow Malamar and regular Malamar both farm it up, and it's Philbeg who wins Charge Attack priority. This is incredibly important information for Philbeg to have, as this means Philbeg now gets to dictate how this battle goes. Philbeg is guaranteed switch advantage in this matchup now, because he's always going to win Charge Attack priority. So he has incentive to throw instantly, and the only way that David can really get out of this scenario is by catching potentially onto something like the Tinkaton. But if he does that, he's giving up switch advantage. So for Filbeg, this is an incredibly good spot to be in. The Shadow Malamar winning the cap tie there being a massive benefit. We're going to see both foul plays reached at the same time, and again, this charge attack priority tie win for Filbeg is just so incredibly important. David is going to end up double shielding, and now Filbeg more than happy to double shield as well, because the triple resisted Psy Waves don't really do much of anything. They're only going to do 1 damage, and Malamar perfectly fine there. We're going to see the foul play reach. David going for the superpower there in case of a potential catch, but no catch comes through, and Malamar is going to pick up the knockout. In comes Tinkaton. Filbeg ran ABA weak to the Tinkaton. He is going to get the superpower. This Shadow Superpower is going to do massive damage into the Tinkaton. Superpower is going to land. Tinkaton gets rocked. There's going to be the switch into the Blastoise, and Filbeg with a quick reaction time here gets to send out Furret. While Furret does lose the 0 shield to Blastoise, the important thing is landing a Trailblaze and just getting damage on this Pokemon. Ideally, you would hope to get the Blastoise low enough that you can Fairy Wind down without the Blastoise making a Hydro Cannon, as that way, it's just an incredibly easy win. Blastoise, both Sucker Punches are going to land, and this is going to be very close. Can Blastoise hang on here? It's going to be 5 Fairy Winds that it has to survive. Filbeg gonna send in the Tinkaton. Tinkaton looking for the farm down, and it's not gonna get there. And suddenly, the energy that David has, I believe it's 6 Fairy Winds on his Tinkaton, is gonna be a problem. David is ahead by 1 Fairy Wind in this matchup. And on top of that, both Tinkatons are in double Bulldoze range. Bulldoze is going to land. We do not see the debuff come through. Filbeg going to launch his own Bulldoze, but now it's a guessing game for David. Does Filbeg go for a catch? Does he stay in? David farming up to the Bulldoze. He predicts the catch. There's no catch. He stays in. What a read from Filbeg. He predicts that David will overfarm. He wins charge attack priority. Bulldoze KOs, and the Blastoise is getting Fairy Winded down, and Filbeg is up 2-0. We move to game number 3, Tinkaton versus Tinkaton, and Filbeg is actually running the identical line of 3 that I used to climb to 3,500 elo in the Open Great League this season. Tinkaton, Furret, and Shadow Malamar. Filbeg knows from the previous game he wins charge attack priority in this matchup, and David knows that because of that, he cannot afford to stay in. So he safe switches into the Blastoise, saving the energy on the Tinkaton, and he's luring out the Furret to try and set up a Lapras sweep. But the beauty of the Tinkaton, Furret, Shadow Malamar line is there's an even worse counter for the Lapras lurking in the back. The unfortunate thing for Filbeg is he will have to go down a shield here, so it will set up the Lapras for David at a shield advantage. And looking into the team for Filbeg, Lapras up a shield can beat most things, but what it can't beat is what's back there, which is the Shadow Malamar. Furret is going to get a full farm down here, exiting with energy. It is boosted, and here's a really interesting choice from Filbeg. He decides to not throw this energy. Instead, he wanted David to throw all of the Tinkaton energy, because he knew that even at +1, his energy still wouldn't do a lot to the Tinkaton since it is all walled. But instead, he got David to throw his energy quickly, and that means he's now at a pretty significant energy advantage in the Tinkaton mirror. Bulldoze is going to land. It looks like David is in a range where a second Bulldoze would be able to pick up the knockout even without a defense drop. Bulldoze coming through from David. Bulldoze is going to land. Do we see the drop? We do not. And now another Bulldoze will be launched here. David has a decision to make. He is going to invest in the Tinkaton. Bulldoze is shielded. No debuff coming through once again. And now David will fire off another Bulldoze. But for Filbeg, he knows he's still not in Bulldoze range. He can no shield, threaten a shield with the Bulldoze, so David is going to catch onto the Lapras. This does desync the switch timers, but unfortunately not enough because Shadow Malamar gets to hit the field. We do see the Bulldoze defense drop as well. Even without the defense drop, this game was over. But with the defense drop, there is just no hope. Not that there really was anyway. David is going to shield. He ends up shielding up the foul play, and Shadow Malamar gets to continue to farm. Shadow Malamar knows that it can survive any one move here. This is open team sheets, so he knows he does not have to worry about a Skull Bash. He gets to fire off another foul play, and this is just going to do too much damage to the Lapras. Foul play into the Lapras is going to pick up the knockout. In comes Tinkaton. Tinkaton needs to get the 2 moves. It cannot get there, and Filbeg continues his dominance in Bologna. That's a 3-0 sweep in winners finals, and he's going to advance to grand finals. And in grand finals, he was matched against PvP David once again. David defeated Cullen 6 in the losers finals to get a rematch against Philbag. This is again a best of 5 series. Philbag, out of the winner's side of the bracket, only needs to win 1 best of 5. David, out of the loser's side of the bracket, will need to win 2 best of 5 series against Philbag if he wants to be crowned champion here in Bologna. The teams, we have seen them before: Lapras, Diggersby, Shadow Jumpluff, Tinkaton, Blastoise, and Malamar for PvP David. And for Philbag, running that trusty 3 of Shadow Malamar, Tinkaton, and Furret, and then pairing it up with Swampert, Azumarill, and Talonflame. And it really feels like it's been the Furret, Tinkaton, Malamar show, with the other 3 not seeing a ton of play so far. Leads are set for game number 1. Shadow Malamar into Blastoise, and this is an absolutely dominant matchup for Shadow Malamar. It's in situations like these when you really get to appreciate the sheer power of Shadow Malamar, and you understand why next season they added so many things to beat it, because currently it really doesn't have any counters. That foul play is going to land, and that can now just set up the Malamar to double shield and fully farm down. Malamar is never going to take a charge move in this matchup. Malamar more than happy to shield. It can fire off the foul play here, and if David matches shields, Philbag is just going to double shield, Psywave all the way down, and the energy goes everywhere into David's team. David doesn't have an Azumarill like Philbag does that can just absorb hits from Malamar. Everything on the team is hit for at least neutral by one of the moves. So Shadow Malamar exits with energy. In comes Tinkaton, and Tinkaton is farming up here. Tinkaton going for a Bulldoze, fishing for a debuff here, but Bulldoze is a very weak move. It will not be enough to knock out. Bulldoze into the Malamar, no debuff comes through, and Malamar is going to get both superpowers. This is so unfortunate. David just shaking his head. This Shadow Malamar is just running away with game after game after game. Another superpower coming through. He's got a no shield. Tinkaton gets rocked, and now he can just bring in the Furret. He's going to stay, try and get to the play rough. He does not get there. It's Diggersby in the back, and Furret up energy is just going to run away with this. Furret plus Malamar, so incredibly deadly. Trailblaze is going to connect. We see a no shield from David on the first, as he is going to return fire here with the Scorching Sands. And this is already approaching play rough range for the Tinkaton, which is very, very nice. Scorching Sands, no debuff comes through, and he's just going for the Swift, guaranteeing to lock in some kind of damage or get the final shield, and either one is game winning for Philbag. So Philbag will be knocked out here by the Scorching Sands, but one Scorching Sands does not knock out Tinkaton. So Tinkaton is going to be able to just very, very cleanly take this game. Tinkaton is going to very easily make it to the play rough. David realizes that his Scorching Sands will not knock out, so that's why he doesn't throw his energy. He's not going to waste time throwing a move that won't impact the outcome of the game. Instead, he can take this moment to strategize and try and recover for game number 2. In game number 2, it's Shadow Malamar into regular Malamar, but the information that we learned in winners finals is going to be such an advantage for Philbag. Philbag knows he is always going to win this lead because he wins charge attack priority. So he gets to fire off the foul play. That's going to be shielded. David committing an early shield in this matchup. Philbag knows he doesn't have to shield the first, but if David shielded, he will eventually look to match shields here. He can now fire off this next foul play. Foul play. Oh, a nice catch by David, as David is able to catch onto the Tinkaton. But guess what? It's not his own Tinkaton in the back. He's made an adjustment in strategy. He has brought the Swampert. He banks a superpower on that Malamar, and now in comes Swampert. Swampert more than happy to absorb a play rough here. Play rough will do quite a bit of damage. Philbag continuing the overfarm here. David actually makes a really nice play going for the Bulldoze. As Bulldoze, it wouldn't knock out, but with the debuff, it can potentially threaten a Fairy Wind down, so it forces a shield from Philbag. So Philbag probably did not want to let that move be reached, so a small misplay from Philbag in a day where he has been basically flawless. In comes the Shadow Malamar. We see a beautiful switch and a catch, catching the Hydro Cannon onto Blastoise. The peekaboo play from David, but now this is going to set up Furret. And normally, Blastoise can win the Zero Shield because it's able to survive the Trail Blaze plus the Sucker Punches, but not anymore. With that Hydro Cannon landing, this Blastoise is now in a range where Trail Blaze will be able to pick up the knockout. Furret, just going to overfarm here, playing 2 charge attack priority, maximizing as much energy as it possibly can. Filbeg playing brilliantly. It's all up to the Shadow Malamar. Shadow Malamar going to be hit now with a boosted Swift. If you're David, where do you use your shield? David is going to shield here. David continuing to farm. He cannot Psywave down. He'll be forced to throw. Furret has a choice to make. Do you shield and let that Sucker Punch land? Filbeg says yes. He shields. This forces the energy instantly, but the reason why he shielded there was to let that Sucker Punch that snuck register. Because now this is basically in a range where Superpower can knock out. He gets to send in the Malamar, farm up as much as he can, going for the Superpower, and because of all those boosted Sucker Punches from Furret, it put it into a range where Superpower picks up the KO, and Filbeg is now 1 win away from history. And in game number 3, it's Tinkaton versus Tinkaton. And we take a look in the back. He's again running that Tinkaton, Malamar, and Furret line. And my goodness, with the double water in the back for David, those water types are going to be in some serious trouble against the back line for Filbeg. These Tinkaton are going to be trading Bulldozes back and forth, but with the knowledge Filbeg has that he wins Charge Attack priority, this just makes this matchup feel almost impossible. David making a nice catch of the Bulldoze, so doing his best to try and fight back, but this matchup is just an absolute nightmare. The Bulldoze gets the debuff as well. It's a 50-50 chance. Furret just gets to make the Trailblaze, and because of that defense drop, I think it's just going to knock out. David lets it go. It KOs, and Blastoise loses all of its energy, and for David, he knows, unfortunately, the end is near. David is a brilliant player, but Filbeg has been on an absolute heater all day. Honestly, all weekend in his home country of Italy, he has been absolutely flawless. Play Rough fired off by the Tinkaton. Furret can survive this, so Play Rough not even going to be enough to KO. Furret's going to need to be hit with another move, and that is 12 Fairy Winds of energy thrown by David to KO this Furret. This Furret proving to be such a nuisance. It still doesn't KO, and it's Shadow Malamar and Lapras in the back, and this game is over. Filbeg knows he can just go straight foul play. He doesn't even have to go for the superpower. David's gonna call it, trying to make some kind of magic happen, but triple resistant Psywaves just feel like there is just no ground ever gained into the Malamar. Sparkling Aria is gonna connect. He's gonna continue to overfarm quite significantly here. And I believe that was actually a charge attack priority die once again. Foul play to the Sparkling Aria. Foul play is going to be shielded, and we're going to see the Sparkling Aria launched, but Filbeg more than happy to commit the shield. Filbeg at this point has to know this game is over. Another foul play reached. David, where can he use his shields? There's no good place to use them. He is going to end up shielding on the Lapras. There's the switch into the Tinkaton, and for Filbeg, he is just completely winning. Filbeg is going to get the Bulldoze. The GGs are exchanged, and history has been made in Bologna. David gonna go for an Ice Beam here. The competitors having a bit of fun with it since they know the game's over. He throws the resisted Ice Beam. But Filbeg has etched his name into the history books. He goes 18-0 in his home country of Italy. The Bologna Special Championship belongs to Filbeg. He not only clinches an invitation to the World Championships later this year, but he is the second trainer in history to achieve the impossible. A perfect tournament. 18 wins, 0 losses. He did not drop a single game over the course of 2 action-packed days of battling. Oftentimes, when watching greatness unfold as it happens, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to quantify. In the same way that you don't know what the good old days are until they have gone behind you. But I think in this instance, it's pretty clear. What we witnessed this weekend was an unbelievable performance. Only the second unbeaten regional in competitive Pokemon Go history. 18 wins, 0 losses, going up against some of the best competition that Europe had to offer. 18 wins, 0 losses, and 1 ticket to the World Championships this August in Anaheim, California. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Homesize Henry, and this is the More Slice Henry channel, where I cover content centered around the Pokemon Go Championship Series, educational content, as well as just any content that I may want to make. If you enjoy this content, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not, and I'll see you guys in the next one.